Tonight, Zambia is shocked. Edgar Lungu's personal lawyer has just turned on former First Lady Esther Lungu, and the Patriotic Front is furious. They're blaming President Hakainde Hichilema for masterminding what they call dirty political warfare. What really happened in court? Why is PF accusing HH of betrayal? And is Esther Lungu the new political target? We break down the drama, the betrayal, and what it all means for Zambia's future. Right now, only on InspirAfrica Official. Don't blink, the truth is finally out. Lungu's most trusted lawyer has reportedly turned against Esther Lungu in a stunning courtroom twist, and now the Patriotic Front (PF) is openly accusing President Hakainde Hichilema (HH) of orchestrating a political trap. What happened inside the court? Why is Esther Lungu suddenly alone? Is HH manipulating the legal system for revenge? In this exclusive documentary, InspirAfrica Official uncovers the full story with in-depth analysis, PF statements, court reactions, and potential implications for the 2026 elections. Don't forget to subscribe, like, and share for more verified Zambian political coverage. Betrayal rocks Zambia. Zambia, a landlocked nation in southern Africa, has long been regarded as a beacon of democratic stability in a region often marred by political turmoil. However, recent events surrounding former First Lady Esther Lungu, her family, and the Patriotic Front (PF) party have shaken the nation's political landscape, exposing deep-seated rivalries, allegations of corruption, and questions about the independence of Zambia's institutions. The phrase "betrayal rocks Zambia" encapsulates the public and political sentiment surrounding a series of legal actions, court battles, and accusations that have thrust Esther Lungu and her late husband, former President Edgar Lungu, into the spotlight. These events are not merely isolated incidents, but part of a broader narrative of political retribution, legal maneuvering, and public distrust that threatens to undermine Zambia's democratic fabric. The arrest of Esther Lungu and her daughter, Chieso Kati, on fraud and money laundering charges in May 2024, followed by the death of Edgar Lungu in June 2025, has intensified political tensions. The subsequent dispute over Edgar Lungu's funeral arrangements and the ongoing legal scrutiny of Esther Lungu have fueled accusations of betrayal, both personal and political. The PF, Zambia's main opposition party, has accused President Hakainde Hichilema's United Party for National Development (UPND) government of orchestrating a campaign to discredit and marginalize the Lungu family and the PF ahead of the 2026 general elections. Meanwhile, the public is divided, with some viewing the legal actions against Esther Lungu as a legitimate anti-corruption drive, while others see them as a politically motivated vendetta. This saga began to unfold prominently in 2023 when Edgar Lungu announced his return to active politics, a move that reignited his rivalry with Hichilema. The Constitutional Court's ruling in December 2024, barring Lungu from running for president again, followed by his death in South Africa, marked a turning point. The refusal of Lungu's family to allow Hichilema to preside over his funeral, coupled with allegations of judicial interference and political manipulation, has created a narrative of betrayal that resonates across Zambia. This introduction sets the stage for a deeper exploration of the key questions surrounding this controversy, including the role of Esther Lungu's lawyer, the PF's accusations against Hichilema, the court proceedings, the political fallout, public reactions, and the broader implications for Zambia's future. Who is the lawyer betraying Esther Lungu? The question of who is the lawyer betraying Esther Lungu points to a complex and contentious issue involving legal representation, political loyalties, and public perception. The lawyer at the center of this controversy is Makibi Zulu, a prominent Zambian attorney who has represented both Edgar Lungu and Esther Lungu in various legal battles. The notion of betrayal stems from allegations and public discourse suggesting that Zulu's actions or statements may have compromised the interests of Esther Lungu or the broader Lungu family, particularly in the context of ongoing legal and political disputes. Background on Makibi Zulu. Makibi Zulu is a well-known figure in Zambia's legal and political circles, often associated with the Patriotic Front due to his representation of Edgar Lungu and other PF members. As a constitutional lawyer, Zulu has been involved in high-profile cases, including defending Lungu against allegations of corruption and challenging the government's actions against the former president and his family. His role became particularly prominent following Esther Lungu's arrest in May 2024 by the Drug Enforcement Commission (DEC) on charges of possessing properties suspected to be proceeds of crime. The case involved a $1.5 million estate in Lusaka, which authorities claimed Esther Lungu could not adequately explain. Zulu has also been a vocal critic of President Hichilema's administration, accusing it of targeting the Lungu family for political reasons. For instance, he described the suspension of 3 constitutional court judges in September 2024 as executive overreach aimed at interfering with the independence of the judiciary. These judges were set to rule on Edgar Lungu's eligibility to contest the 2026 elections, a case that ultimately barred Lungu from running. Zulu's outspokenness has made him a polarizing figure, admired by PF supporters but criticized by those who view his actions as partisan. Allegations of betrayal. The accusation of betrayal appears to stem from specific incidents that have raised questions about Zulu's conduct or effectiveness in representing Esther Lungu. One key event occurred during the legal battle over Edgar Lungu's burial in 2025, following his death in South Africa. The Lungu family, represented by Zulu, clashed with the Zambian government government over the location and nature of Lungu's funeral. The family insisted on a private funeral in South Africa, citing Lungu's dying wish that Hichilema not be involved, while the government pushed for a state funeral in Lusaka. In a South African court hearing on August 4, 2025, Zulu's performance was scrutinized, with some critics alleging that his arguments were inadequate or poorly presented. A post on X described his conduct as amateurish, suggesting that his handling of the case may have weakened the Lungu family's position. Specifically, Zulu's assertion that Esther Lungu wanted her husband's body buried in South Africa was challenged by those who argued that it undermined the dignity of a former head of state and failed to align with Zambian traditions for state funerals. Critics, including some PF supporters, questioned whether Zulu's legal strategy inadvertently played into the hands of the Hichilema administration, which sought to control the narrative around Lungu's legacy. Additionally, there have been suggestions that Zulu's public statements may have escalated tensions unnecessarily, potentially exposing Esther Lungu to further scrutiny. For example, his accusation that the Hichilema government was responsible for Edgar Lungu's death due to a travel ban, a claim denied by the government, drew significant attention but lacked concrete evidence. Some observers argued that such statements shifted focus away from Esther Lungu's legal defense, portraying her as a victim of political persecution rather than addressing the substantive charges against her. Context of Esther Lungu's legal troubles. Esther Lungu's legal troubles began in earnest in September 2023 when she was arrested over allegations of theft involving motor vehicles and title deeds. The 2024 charges escalated the situation, accusing her daughter Chieso Katit, and a relative, Charles Fairai, of owning properties worth $1.5 million that were suspected to be proceeds of crime. The DEC's investigation focused on Esther's inability to provide a reasonable explanation for the source of funds used to acquire the estate. Zulu's role was to challenge these charges in court, arguing that they were part of a broader campaign to discredit the Lungu family and prevent Edgar Lungu's political comeback. The perception of betrayal may also arise from the broader political context, where PF supporters feel that legal representatives like Zulu have failed to protect the party's interests against a relentless anti-corruption campaign. The PF has accused the Hichilema administration of using state institutions, including the DEC and the judiciary, to target its members. Zulu's inability to secure favorable outcomes in high-profile cases, such as Edgar Lungu's eligibility case or Esther Lungu's fraud charges, has led some to question his loyalty or competence, despite his vocal defense of the family. Analysis of the betrayal narrative. The notion of betrayal is likely amplified by the intense political polarization in Zambia. For PF supporters, any perceived misstep by Zulu, whether in courtroom strategy or public statements, can be interpreted as a failure to uphold the party's cause. However, there is no definitive evidence that Zulu has acted against Esther Lungu's interests intentionally. His outspoken criticism of the government and his efforts to secure a private funeral for Edgar Lungu align with the family's wishes, suggesting loyalty rather than betrayal. The criticism may reflect broader frustrations within the PF about their weakened position rather than specific actions by Zulu. In conclusion, Makibi Zulu is the lawyer at the center of the betrayal narrative, primarily due to his role in representing Esther Lungu and the Lungu family in their legal battles. While some criticize his legal strategies or public statements as inadequate, others see him as a staunch defender of a family under siege. The accusation of betrayal appears to be more a reflection of political frustrations than a substantiated claim of disloyalty. PF's reaction, accusing HH of dirty politics. The Patriotic Front's reaction to the events surrounding Esther Lungu and Edgar Lungu's death has been one of outrage, with the party accusing President Hakainde Hichilema of engaging in dirty politics to undermine the PF and its leadership. This section explores the PF's accusations, the context behind them, and the broader political dynamics at play. PF's allegations against Hichilema. The PF has consistently framed the legal actions against Esther Lungu and the handling of Edgar Lungu's funeral as part of a deliberate campaign by Hichilema's UPND government to weaken the opposition. Key accusations include political persecution through anti-corruption probes. The PF argues that the arrests of Esther Lungu, her daughter Chieso Katit, and other relatives on fraud and money laundering charges are politically motivated. The 2024 arrest of Esther Lungu over a $1.5 million estate was described by Edgar Lungu as an attempt to block his political comeback ahead of the 2026 elections. The PF claims that the Hichilema administration is using the DEC and other state agencies to target PF members selectively, while ignoring similar allegations against UPND affiliates. Judicial interference. The suspension of 3 constitutional court judges in September 2024, who were set to rule on Edgar Lungu's eligibility to contest the 2026 elections, was labeled by the PF as an illegality and an example of executive overreach. The PF, through spokespersons like Emmanuel Mwamba, expressed concern that the judiciary was being manipulated to exclude Lungu from the political arena. The subsequent court ruling in December 2024, which barred Lungu from running, was seen as evidence of Hichilema's influence over the judiciary. Funeral dispute as political manipulation. The PF accused the Hichilema government of exploiting Edgar Lungu's death for political gain. The government's insistence on a state funeral in Lusaka against the family family's wishes for a private burial in South Africa was seen as an attempt to control Lungu's legacy and project an image of national unity under Hichilema's leadership. The PF dismissed the government's designated mourning venue and set up its own condolence book, urging supporters to reject the state's arrangements. The party also alleged that Hichilema's administration was partly responsible for Lungu's death, claiming that a travel ban prevented him from seeking timely medical treatment abroad. Leaked audio allegations. A particularly explosive claim emerged from a leaked audio recording in which PF defector Robert Shabinga allegedly insinuated that he was sent by Hichilema to bribe South African judges to influence the outcome of the funeral dispute. The PF seized on this to accuse Hichilema of undermining international justice and engaging in corrupt practices to control the narrative around Lungu's death. Context of the PF-UPND rivalry. The accusations of dirty politics must be understood within the context of the long-standing rivalry between Hichilema and Lungu. The two leaders faced each other in 3 presidential elections, 2006, 2016, and 2021, with Hichilema finally defeating Lungu in 2021 by a significant margin. Their enmity dates back to Lungu's presidency, 2015 to 2021, during which Hichilema was arrested 17 times, including a 100-day detention on treason charges in 2017 for allegedly endangering Lungu's life by failing to give way to his motorcade. These incidents left a lasting bitterness, with Hichilema supporters accusing Lungu of authoritarian tendencies, and the PF alleging that Hichilema's presidency is driven by a desire for revenge. The PF's narrative of dirty politics gained traction after Lungu announced his return to active politics in October 2023, prompting the government to withdraw his retirement benefits. The PF interpreted this as an attempt to financially and politically cripple Lungu. The subsequent barring of Lungu from the 2026 elections by the Constitutional Court and the legal actions against Esther Lungu further reinforced the PF's belief that Hichilema was targeting the party's leadership to ensure his re-election. Government's response. The Hichilema administration has consistently denied the PF's accusations. Information Minister Cornelius Mwitwa dismissed claims of a travel ban on Edgar Lungu as fiction and argued that the government's anti-corruption efforts were not selective but aimed at recovering looted resources. The government also defended the suspension of the Constitutional Court judges as a legal process based on recommendations from the Judicial Complaints Commission (JCC), rejecting accusations of political interference. Regarding the funeral dispute, the government emphasized the importance of historical precedent for state funerals and expressed a desire to honor Lungu appropriately while respecting the family's wishes. Analysis of PF's strategy. The PF's accusations of dirty politics serve multiple purposes. First, they rally the party's base by framing the UPND as an oppressive regime, thereby maintaining loyalty among supporters disillusioned by the party's 2021 electoral loss. Second, they position the PF as a victim of state overreach, appealing to public sympathy and potentially attracting undecided voters. Third, they deflect attention from the substantive allegations against Esther Lungu and other PF members, framing them as politically motivated rather than legitimate legal concerns. However, the PF strategy is not without risks. The party's internal divisions, particularly the factionalism between Lungu's supporters and those of Miles Sampa, have weakened its cohesion. The reliance on inflammatory rhetoric, such as the bribery allegations based on the leaked audio, may backfire if not substantiated, potentially alienating moderate voters. Moreover, the PF's focus on Lungu's legacy and the funeral dispute risks overshadowing its efforts to rebuild as a viable opposition force ahead of the 2026 elections. In summary, the PF's accusations of dirty politics reflect a broader strategy to counter the UPND's dominance and rally support. While these claims resonate with the party's base, they also highlight the deep polarization in Zambian politics and the challenges the PF faces in presenting a united front. What happened in court? Full breakdown. The court proceedings related to Esther Lungu and the broader Lungu family involve multiple cases, including her fraud and money laundering charges and the dispute over Edgar Lungu's burial. This section provides a detailed breakdown of these legal battles, focusing on the key events, arguments, and outcomes. Esther Lungu's fraud and money laundering case. Background. On May 30, 2024, Esther Lungu, her daughter Chieso Katit, and a relative, Charles Fairai, were arrested by the Drug Enforcement Commission's Anti-Money Laundering Unit in Lusaka. They were charged with possessing properties, including a $1.5 million estate, suspected to be proceeds of crime. The DEC alleged that Esther Lungu failed to give a reasonable explanation for how she acquired the estate. This followed an earlier arrest in September 2023 over allegations of theft involving motor vehicles and title deeds, which Esther denied. Court proceedings. Initial arrest and charges. May 2024, the DEC's case centered on the claim that the properties were acquired through illicit means, possibly linked to corruption during Edgar Lungu's presidency. Esther Lungu, through her lawyer Makibi Zulu, challenged the charges, arguing that they were politically motivated to tarnish the Lungu family's reputation and block Edgar Lungu's political comeback. The family was ordered to appear at the DEC for further questioning, but no specific court date was immediately set. Public and legal response. Edgar Lungu publicly stated that the family would fight the charges in court, framing them as part of a broader campaign of victimization by the Hichilema administration. The lack of immediate court proceedings kept the case in the public eye, with social media posts on X amplifying the narrative of political persecution. Ongoing investigations. As of August 2025, Esther Lungu's case remains under investigation, with no final court ruling reported. The properties in question have been seized by the government, prompting accusations from PF supporters that the UPND is targeting the Lungu family's wealth to weaken their political influence. Earlier case, September 2023. The 2023 case involved allegations of financial impropriety related to $400,000 entrusted to Catherine Banda, a niece of Edgar Lungu. Banda claimed to have given $300,000 to Elizabeth Fairai and Fohana Patel, leading to a complaint about theft of vehicles and property. Esther Lungu's court appearance on September 29, 2023 at the Lusaka Magistrate Court Complex drew significant attention, with the PF arguing that the charges were baseless and designed to humiliate the former First Lady. The outcome of this case is not fully detailed in available sources, but it contributed to the narrative of targeted persecution. Edgar Lungu's burial dispute. Background. Following Edgar Lungu's death on June 5, 2025 in South Africa, a bitter dispute arose between his family, the PF, and the Zambian government over his funeral arrangements. The family, led by Esther Lungu and supported by Makibi Zulu, insisted on a private funeral in South Africa, citing Lungu's dying wish that Hichilema not be involved. The government, however, pushed for a state funeral at Embassy Park Presidential Burial Site in Lusaka, in line with tradition for former heads of state. Court proceedings in South Africa. Initial standoff. June 2025, the Zambian government planned to repatriate Lungu's body on June 11, 2025, but the Lungu family and PF rejected this, leading to a delay. The family held a memorial service in South Africa, attended by Esther Lungu and her daughter Tassila, while negotiations with the government continued. The government declared a 7-day mourning period, but the PF announced its own, creating confusion among mourners. Pretoria High Court hearing. August 4, 2025, the dispute escalated to the Gauteng High Court in Pretoria, where the Zambian government sought to enforce the repatriation of Lungu's body. Makibi Zulu, representing the Lungu family, argued that Edgar Lungu's final wish was to be buried in South Africa and that the government's actions violated the family's rights. The government countered that Lungu's burial was a matter of public interest and that historical precedent required a state funeral in Zambia. Key arguments. Lungu family. Zulu emphasized Lungu's instructions that Hichilema should not be anywhere near his body, citing the former president's treatment as an ordinary citizen after his retirement benefits were withdrawn. The family accused the government of disrespecting Lungu's legacy and attempting to use the funeral for political gain. Zambian government. Foreign Minister Malambo Haimbi argued that a state funeral was necessary to honor Lungu's status as a former president and to maintain national unity. The government denied allegations of a travel ban and insisted that Lungu had access to medical treatment abroad. Court ruling. On June 25, 2025, the Pretoria High Court granted a temporary injunction to postpone Lungu's burial, pending a final decision on the location. The case was scheduled to return to court in early August 2025, leaving Lungu's final resting place unresolved. Leaked audio controversy. A leaked audio recording, allegedly involving PF defector Robert Shabinga, claimed that Hichilema attempted to bribe South African judges to influence the funeral case. The PF used this to bolster its accusations of dirty politics, though the government dismissed the claims as unverified. Edgar Lungu's eligibility case. Background. In December 2024, the Constitutional Court of Zambia ruled that Edgar Lungu was ineligible to run for president in 2026, as his two terms, 2015 to 2016 and 2016 to 2021, counted as the maximum allowed under the Constitution. This followed a contentious legal battle initiated by Moses Callan, challenging Lungu's eligibility after his return to politics in 2023. Court proceedings. Initial rulings. In 2021, the Constitutional Court had allowed Lungu to run, arguing that his first term, 2015 to 2016, was not a full term. However, this decision was revisited in 2024 amid rising political tensions. Suspension of judges. In September 2024, Hichilema suspended 3 Constitutional Court judges who had ruled in Lungu's favor in 2016 and 2021, prompting accusations of judicial interference. The suspensions were based on JCC recommendations, but were widely seen as politically motivated. Final ruling. December 2024, the court, led by Deputy President Arnold Shilemi, ruled that Lungu's first term counted as a full term, rendering him ineligible for future elections. Lungu accepted the verdict, but declared that Plan B was in motion, hinting at alternative strategies to challenge the UPND. PF's reaction. The PF, through Emmanuel Mwamba, expressed grave concern over the ruling, alleging that it was influenced by political manipulation. The heavy police presence outside the court underscored the case's sensitivity. Analysis of court outcomes. The court proceedings reflect a broader struggle for control over Zambia's political narrative. Esther Lungu's case remains unresolved, with ongoing investigations keeping the spotlight on her and the PF. The funeral dispute has highlighted the personal animosity between the Lungu family and Hichilema, with the South African court's involvement adding an international dimension. The eligibility ruling has significant significantly weakened the PF's electoral prospects, as Lungu was their most recognizable leader. Political fallout. What this means for PF. The legal and political developments surrounding Esther Lungu and Edgar Lungu's death have profound implications for the Patriotic Front, Zambia's main opposition party. This section examines the fallout for the PF and its prospects ahead of the 2026 elections. Leadership crisis. Edgar Lungu's death on June 5, 2025, left the PF without its most prominent and unifying figure. Lungu had been a polarizing yet influential leader, capable of rallying the party's base despite internal divisions. His return to politics in 2023 and selection as the Tons Alliance's candidate for 2026 had reinvigorated the PF, but the Constitutional Court's ruling barring him from running and his subsequent death have created a leadership vacuum. The PF is now divided between two factions, one led by Given Labinda, who supported Lungu, and another led by Miles Sampa, who briefly claimed the party presidency in 2023. Although Sampa stepped down in May 2025, reuniting his faction with Lungu's, the party remains fragmented. The lack of a clear successor poses a significant challenge, as potential leaders like Labinda and Sampa have different political pedigrees and may struggle to unite the party. Electoral prospects. The PF's electoral prospects for 2026 have been severely weakened. Lungu's charisma and name recognition were central to the party's strategy, particularly as public dissatisfaction with Hichilema's economic policies grew. Without Lungu, the PF must identify a new presidential candidate capable of challenging Hichilema, who remains a formidable opponent despite economic challenges. The Tons Alliance, which Lungu joined in 2024, relied heavily on his influence, and its effectiveness is now in question. The legal actions against Esther Lungu and other PF members further complicate the party's position. The seizure of properties and ongoing investigations have damaged the PF's public image, reinforcing perceptions of corruption from Lungu's presidency. The PF's narrative of political persecution may resonate with its base, but risks alienating moderate voters who view the anti-corruption drive as legitimate. Internal cohesion. The PF's internal divisions, exacerbated by Lungu's death, threaten its ability to mount a cohesive campaign. The factionalism between Labinda and Sampa, combined with the loss of Lungu's unifying presence, could lead to further fragmentation. The party's decision to reject the government's funeral arrangements and set up its own mourning process has deepened its isolation, potentially alienating supporters who value national unity. Strategic options. To remain competitive, the PF must identify a new leader. The party needs a candidate who can appeal to both its base and undecided voters. Potential candidates like Labinda or Sampa must overcome their limited national appeal. Rebuild alliances. The Tons Alliance and the United Kwacha Alliance (UKA) offer opportunities for coalition building, but the PF must navigate internal rivalries to leverage these partnerships effectively. Counter the anti-corruption narrative. The PF must address allegations of corruption head-on, either by defending its members in court or distancing itself from controversial figures like Esther Lungu. Mobilize public support. The PF's accusations of dirty politics can galvanize its base, but the party must offer a positive vision for Zambia to attract broader support. In conclusion, the political fallout for the PF is significant, with Lungu's death and the legal troubles of Esther Lungu weakening the party's position. The PF faces a leadership crisis, diminished electoral prospects, and the challenge of maintaining internal cohesion. Its ability to adapt and present a united front will determine its relevance in Zambia's political future. Public reaction. Is Esther Lungu the new target? Public reaction to the events surrounding Esther Lungu has been polarized, reflecting Zambia's divided political landscape. This section explores the sentiment among Zambians, as expressed in media reports and social media, and assesses whether Esther Lungu is perceived as the new target of the Hichilema administration. Public sentiment. PF supporters. Among PF supporters, Esther Lungu is widely seen as a victim of political persecution. Posts on X, such as those by @Joseph_Kalimbwe, argue that her arrest and the seizure of her properties are part of a targeted campaign to discredit the Lungu family and weaken the PF. The narrative of dirty politics resonates strongly, with supporters framing the legal actions as revenge for Lungu's past treatment of Hichilema. The funeral dispute further fueled this sentiment, with many PF supporters viewing the government's actions as disrespectful to Lungu's legacy and his family. UPND supporters. Supporters of the UPND and Hichilema view the legal actions against Esther Lungu as a legitimate part of the government's anti-corruption campaign. Social media posts, such as one by @Buyoya Jonah, highlight the arrests as evidence of accountability for alleged corruption during Lungu's presidency. The $1.5 million estate and earlier allegations involving $400,000 are cited as proof of illicit wealth, with some calling for the properties to be repurposed for public use, such as student hostels. The government's defenders argue that Hichilema is fulfilling his promise to recover looted resources, regardless of political affiliations. Neutral observers. Political analysts and neutral observers, such as Laura Mitty, express mixed views. Mitty has acknowledged that the judiciary's handling of past cases, such as Lungu's 2016 election petition, was flawed, but she also warns that Hichilema's actions, such as suspending judges, appear self-serving and risk undermining judicial independence. The funeral dispute has been criticized as a missed opportunity for national unity, with some Zambians expressing confusion and frustration over the competing mourning arrangements. Is Esther Lungu the new target? The question of whether Esther Lungu is the new target hinges on the perception that the Hichilema administration is deliberately focusing on her to weaken the PF. Several factors support this view. Timing of arrests. Esther Lungu's arrests in 2023 and 2024 coincided with Edgar Lungu's political comeback and the PF's efforts to regroup for the 2026 elections. This timing has led many to believe that the government is using her legal troubles to distract and destabilize the opposition. High-profile nature of charges. The focus on a $1.5 million estate and earlier allegations involving significant sums of money has drawn public attention, reinforcing the narrative of corruption within the Lungu family. The government's decision to seize properties amplifies this perception. Family-wide scrutiny. The inclusion of Chieso Katit and other relatives in the 2024 arrests suggests a broader campaign against the Lungu family, which PF supporters interpret as an attempt to tarnish their legacy. However, the government and its supporters argue that Esther Lungu is not being singled out, but is part of a wider anti-corruption effort targeting former officials and their associates. The DEC's investigations into other PF members and the public's demand for accountability lend credence to this view. Critics of the PF also point out that Esther Lungu's inability to explain the source of her wealth raises legitimate questions, regardless of political motives. Social media and public discourse. Social media platforms, particularly X, have been a battleground for competing narratives. PF supporters use hashtags and posts to rally behind Esther Lungu, portraying her as a victim of Hichilema's vendetta. Conversely, UPND supporters and anti-corruption advocates celebrate the arrests as a step toward justice, with some calling for harsher penalties. The leaked audio alleging judicial bribery has further polarized opinions, with PF supporters citing it as evidence of Hichilema's desperation, while others dismiss it as unverified propaganda. In conclusion, public reaction is deeply divided, with Esther Lungu emerging as a focal point in Zambia's political struggle. While PF supporters view her as the new target of a vindictive government, UPND supporters see her as a legitimate subject of anti-corruption efforts. The truth likely lies in a combination of legal accountability and political strategy, with Esther Lungu's high profile making her a convenient symbol for both sides. Final analysis. Legal trap or political strategy. The events surrounding Esther Lungu and the Lungu family raise a critical question. Are the legal actions against them a legitimate effort to combat corruption, a legal trap, or a calculated move to neutralize political opponents, a political strategy? This section analyzes the evidence and arguments for both perspectives. Case for a legal trap. The argument that the actions against Esther Lungu constitute a legal trap emphasizes the legitimacy of the anti-corruption campaign. Substantive allegations. The DEC's charges against Esther Lungu are based on specific claims, such as the $1.5 million estate and earlier allegations involving $400,000, which authorities argue are proceeds of crime. The inability to provide a reasonable explanation for these assets aligns with standard anti-money laundering protocols. Broader anti-corruption drive. Hichilema's administration has targeted multiple former officials and their associates, not just the Lungu family. The government's vow to recover looted resources is part of its electoral mandate, responding to public frustration with corruption during Lungu's presidency. Judicial precedent. The Constitutional Court's ruling on Lungu's ineligibility was grounded in constitutional provisions limiting presidents to 2 terms. The suspension of judges was based on JCC recommendations, suggesting a legal rather than purely political process. Case for a political strategy. The argument that these actions are a political strategy highlights the timing, context, and perceived motives. Timing and context. The arrests of Esther Lungu and the suspension of judges coincided with Edgar Lungu's political comeback and the PF's efforts to challenge Hichilema in 2026. This suggests a deliberate effort to weaken the opposition at a critical juncture. Selective targeting. The PF argues that the anti-corruption campaign disproportionately targets its members, while UPND affiliates face less scrutiny. The withdrawal of Lungu's retirement benefits and the focus on his family reinforce this perception. Funeral dispute. The government's insistence on a state funeral, despite the family's objections, is seen as an attempt to control Lungu's legacy and project an image of unity under Hichilema's leadership. The leaked audio alleging judicial bribery, while unverified, fuels suspicions of political manipulation. Balanced analysis. The reality likely involves elements of both a legal trap and a political strategy. The charges against Esther Lungu are supported by specific allegations, but their timing and the broader context suggest political motives. Hichilema's administration has a legitimate interest in combating corruption, but the selective focus on PF figures and the handling of the funeral dispute raise questions about impartiality. The judiciary's role is particularly contentious, as the suspension of judges and the eligibility ruling have been criticized as undermining judicial independence, even if legally justified. Ultimately, the distinction between between a legal trap and a political strategy depends on perspective. For UPND supporters, the actions are a necessary reckoning for past corruption. For PF supporters, they are a vendetta aimed at destroying the opposition. The truth likely lies in a complex interplay of legal accountability and political maneuvering, with both sides exploiting the situation to advance their agendas. Outro. What's next for Zambia? The events surrounding Esther Lungu, Edgar Lungu's death, and the PF's accusations against Hichilema have far-reaching implications for Zambia's political future. As the country approaches the 2026 general elections, several key issues will shape its trajectory. Opposition dynamics. The PF's ability to recover from Lungu's death and internal divisions will determine its competitiveness. The party must identify a new leader and rebuild alliances like the TONS Alliance and UKA to challenge the UPND effectively. Hichilema's leadership. Hichilema's handling of the Lungu funeral dispute and the anti-corruption campaign will impact his public image. Economic challenges, including Zambia's debt crisis and currency devaluation, remain significant hurdles, and public dissatisfaction could bolster the opposition. Judicial independence. The perception of judicial interference, highlighted by the suspension of judges and the eligibility ruling, risks eroding public trust in Zambia's institutions. Restoring confidence in the judiciary will be critical for democratic stability. Public unity. The funeral dispute and polarized reactions to Esther Lungu's case underscore the need for national reconciliation. Hichilema's call for unity must be matched by actions that bridge the divide between UPND and PF supporters. International implications. The involvement of South African courts and allegations of judicial bribery highlight the international dimension of Zambia's political crisis. Maintaining diplomatic relations and a positive global reputation will be essential. In conclusion, Zambia stands at a crossroads. The resolution of Esther Lungu's legal battles, the PF's regrouping efforts, and Hichilema's governance will shape the country's democratic future. The events of 2024 and 2025 have exposed deep divisions, but they also present an opportunity for Zambia to address systemic issues and strengthen its democratic institutions.